Welcome back to Washington Journal. Joining us this morning is Congressman Randy Fine of Florida, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, to talk about Venezuela. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Well, this is your first time on the program, so let's just dive right in. In a recent interview, Congressman, you said that capturing the Venezuelan former president Nicolas Maduro was an example of putting America first. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think Venezuela was serving as a launch pad for the people who hate us. They were allowing Hezbollah terrorists to operate there and raise hundreds of millions of dollars. They were going to make it a launching pad for China and Russia and Iran. And worse, they were using it as a narco-drug empire to send their drugs into the United States to kill our people. So there's no more important duty of government than to protect Americans and America. And I think going and taking Maduro did exactly that. So I'm very proud of the president. He did a great job, and we all owe him and the soldiers who did the work a great deal of gratitude.
As a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I wonder, do you view taking Maduro, capturing him now, obviously bringing him to New York to face charges, but do you view that as an act of regime change? And do you view that these actions are legal both in the U.S. and international law?
Well, I view it as seizing a drug dealer. So the president doesn't need to check with us every time he wants to go and arrest a drug dealer. Maduro was not the democratically elected president of Venezuela. In fact, there was an election and he lost overwhelmingly. And he said, I don't care. I'm not giving up power. So he was a drug dealer. And so the president had every right to go and get him. That's not a violation.
With the use of military forces.
Well, how else would you go and get a narco-terrorist?
In a different country.
Well, I understand, but the fact that he committed crimes in the United States doesn't get him off the hook. And so I think what he did was absolutely justified. And so I believe we put the interests of America first. Making sure Americans aren't dying of fentanyl-laced cocaine is important. Making sure Muslim terrorists can't operate with impunity in our hemisphere is in our interest. And I think this is a big win. The biggest win is for Venezuelans. Look at how the Venezuelan diaspora is responding in Florida and around the country and the world.
In your home
Unbelievable.
state.
Yeah, my home state. Unbelievable celebration. So the Venezuelans are happy with what we have done. So we win, Venezuela wins, everybody wins, I guess, except the drug dealers.
I wonder if you have any concerns of whether or not this action could lead to further military intervention in Venezuela. Obviously, the president has said that they are prepared to do a second wave of strikes if this current Venezuela government, the former vice president, now interim president, doesn't basically acquiesce to the U.S.'s concerns or requests. I wonder if you feel that there is a potential for boots on the ground.
Well, I'm not particularly worried. It seems like they've gotten the message. With Donald Trump in charge, America is back. And if people don't do the right thing, there's going to be hell to pay. I think, look, we saw the announcement yesterday that we're going to get 30 to 50 million gallons of or barrels of oil to repay us for what we've done. I think we won't have to do it. I think as the American oil companies go back in and get the assets, that keep in mind the Venezuelan government stole from them, they will bring security to make sure things are safe as well. I think this is a win for Venezuela. It's a win for America. Venezuela, what happens in every communist country, they take control and then everything falls apart. They'll now be able to produce more oil. That's good for their economy. It's good for the world. I just think this is a win for everybody, except, again, people who just want to complain.
I want to ask you more about oil in a second, but I want to bring up this this Wall Street Journal report that says the headline is CIA concluded regime loyalists were best placed to lead Venezuela after Maduro, and it cites a recent classified U.S. intelligence assessment. One, I want to know if you've read it, but basically it says that a recent classified U.S. intelligence assessment determined top members of the Nicolas Maduro's regime, including Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, would be best positioned to lead a temporary government in Caracas and maintain near stability if the autocrat lost power. People familiar with the matter said the president was briefed on this. Other top officials were briefed on this. And that is despite the fact that multiple people potentially in the region felt that Machado, that opposition leader, or others would be put in place if the regime were to fall. I wonder, what's your response to that? Did you have any knowledge of this assessment? And from folks in Florida, were they surprised at the president's comments, basically saying that Machado did not have the ability to lead?
Well, I think if you look at from the perspective of what's going to be the least disruptive, basically allowing that same government to continue to operate with the removal of the drug dealer is the easiest in the short term. And the challenge in bringing in the group that lost the election a few years ago is they're not in a position to simply take over and stand up the government. Many of the opposition figures left the country. You can't blame them. They were being killed and all sorts of other terrible things being done to them. I think what we're talking about with the current government is temporary until they can have an election so that a legitimate government comes in, and maybe Machado will win, maybe someone else will win. But I think this is just to get us through that transition with the minimal disruption, the minimal amount of American military force, and what's best for Venezuelans and what's best for America.
But President Rodriguez, or acting President Rodriguez, is still, Maduro's number two. A lot of their military generals are still in place. I wonder, do you view them as a credible working partners, despite the fact that they were handpicked by Maduro?
I think it's a short-term solution. I think what they've seen is bad actions will yield consequences that they won't like. When you've got to discipline your kids and you say, if you don't do what you want, I'm going to take away the iPad for a few days. Well, when the first time you take away the iPad for a few days, often they get the message and the behavior changes. And I think that's what's happened here. They've shown that we're willing to go after and get Maduro. I think the people that are there are going to go, okay, I better act differently. Maybe I shouldn't be putting on drugs on boats and driving them into the United States. I think they know we are watching, and we'll see how they behave. The other thing is, a fish rots from the head. The head has been removed, aka Maduro, and we give folks a chance to see if they'll do the right thing.
What timeline do you think the administration should require Venezuela to have elections? Obviously, Marco Rubio has said in the past few days that there is no immediate timeline. I wonder, from your perspective, particularly because you have a lot of folks from the Caribbean in your district in Florida, do you think that they should call for elections?
Well, I think we're talking about something that's sort of within months to a year, and I don't know the exact time frame. Because remember, we want them to have an election, but if we say you have to have the election next week, that's not enough time. We also don't need to give them 5 years as well. So we want there to be a robust election so people have a shot to come in, and so whoever wins has the ability to go and take control. I'm excited because I can see the enthusiasm among Venezuelans in Florida for this, and I also want it set up so that the 700,000 to 800,000 Venezuelan refugees that are in the United States, they can go home, and that will reduce the pressure on social services in the United States. It will reduce what we're spending on welfare programs as these folks return to their home country. So I want to make sure that we've set Venezuela up to allow those people to go home.
A few more questions here before we turn to our callers. Sure. But Congressman, a classified briefing for the full House and Senate is expected to happen today with administration officials on their efforts in Venezuela. What questions do you have?
Well, I don't have that many. I'm there to listen. Look, I trust the judgment of Donald Trump. He has never let me down, and I don't expect him to do anytime soon. I want to learn what happened. I want to learn why they felt they needed to do this. I want to learn how it went down. I want to learn how we were able to so successfully go in, capture him in a few minutes, and how did none of our assets get taken, none of our people get hurt. I think this is a story that we need to learn. We need to trumpet, and we need to send this message to the rest of the world that our military is by far the most prepared in the world. So I'll be going to listen, but not to jockey like some of the Democrats will, to just ask questions and cause trouble. But obviously the results speak for themselves. One of the world's worst people was taken into custody, and now he'll be held accountable for that.
And last question here before we turn to calls. An NBC article from an exclusive interview with the president. He said that the headline is, Trump says the U.S. government may reimburse oil companies for rebuilding Venezuela's infrastructure. This has been a topic of conversation. I wonder, do you support taxpayers reimbursing oil companies that would invest in Venezuela's oil infrastructure to rebuild over, an unknown amount of time?
Well, he didn't say how. And I'm just going to read in between the lines. When you're getting 50 million
Well, he
gallons,
said, and then they'll get rearbursed by us,
but
or through revenue.
Reimbursed through what form of funding? Sure. When we just learned yesterday, we're getting up to 50 million gallons or barrels of oil. That's going to be billions of dollars. My assumption is that will be the vehicle to do that.
But isn't that, I talked to one expert from University of Houston yesterday who said that the U.S. produces about 50 million barrels of oil every 4 days. Mm-hmm. And that was the top of the estimate that President Trump put in that Truth Social. So I wonder, isn't that kind of just a drop in the bucket, although significant for Venezuela? I mean, when we're talking about whether or not the taxpayers are paying for some of this, I wonder if you have any concerns or you believe that that money should go to oil companies to reimburse them for their efforts.
Well, if it is only 50 million, and that could be a drop in the bucket, to use an analogy, that would still be billions of dollars. And I don't know how much money they actually need. The point that the president is making, though, is that Venezuelan oil coming onto the market will help bring oil prices down in the United States. That's good for our consumers. It'll also make us more economically secure, and it potentially takes away an asset that's going to feed our enemies in China and Russia. So I think it's a win across the board. And I think when the president's talking about reimbursement, I suspect it's from those 50, that starting point. I don't think that'll be the end of those 50 million gallons.
So you don't believe it'll be with taxpayers?
No, I don't think we're going to, I doubt that we're going to take taxpayer money to do that. I mean, I think, again, he's already starting with several $billion from that. I don't even know how much money they need to be reimbursed, but I suspect that's what he's talking about.